Good morning, everybody. So we've seen in England the response of the government in terms of people putting up the English flag. And now we're seeing the same sort of thing in Ireland, right? And look, while I understand the sentiment and the emotion and the desire to defend and protect something that you think is emblematic or symbolic of you and your family's history and your people's history, absolutely important. Off you go. You have my full support on that. But I want people to kind of peel a layer back a little bit and look at this thing, set the emotion aside for a second and look at what is really happening, okay? So last week or the previous few weeks, the conversation was around how successive Irish governments have been costing the lives of children, Irish children, right? By gross negligence, gross incompetence, total indifference and apathy to people, the people that they're paid by and that they are supposed to be representing, right? This was a massive conversation, so big that we had deathly silence from the government, right? Because they were trying to come up with a way of derailing that conversation, okay? And you see with Simon Harris, right? So any of them, right? Any politician, it's a game, right? It's a game. It's a game for your attention, right? And the enemy at the moment is still controlling our attention. Simon Harris does this by offering out hooks, right? He'll throw out something that he knows is going to get somewhat reasonable, somewhat over the top, and somewhat exaggerated responses, right? So in the middle of the conversation of Simon Harris overseeing the needless death of Irish children, something that was in his power to stop, right? And something that he said he would stop or help to stop, right? So he failed. In the middle of that conversation, we see photos of him bringing his kids into office, into work, kicking football with him, that sort of thing. And then we see him talk about wanting to speak with disabled kids and all this sort of stuff, right? And then he comes out, all the newspapers in unison come out with the story that the guards are investigating the threat, and there was a woman arrested, I believe, for making threats apparently against Simon Harris's children, right? So he baits people. He baits people with these images and with these things, and people bite, right? So now he can swerve the conversation away from his failings, right, into him being the victim, and the conversation about politicians needing more protection, right, which increases the size of the state, right, which impacts on you negatively, because it's going to spill over into your personal life as well, right? But now, outside of that, then, the conversation has gone from that to now flags. And again, as I said at the outset, I'm not diminishing one's loyalty or fidelity or one's allegiance or love or emotional tie to the flag of Ireland. I'm not doing that, right? I'm talking about the manoeuvres that are happening above the individual topics, right? The manufacturing of which topic comes into the limelight, which comes into the foreground. And as Heidegger said, right, when we choose to do one thing, we are foregoing the choice of thousands of other options, right? And that's what we're doing at the moment. It's a Gestalt game, right? So what topic gets brought into the foreground of conversation becomes the highlight. And whatever was in the foreground preceding that gets withdrawn into the background, and then it gets forgotten about and ignored, and then it falls from public consciousness, right? So they substitute out a heavy-hitting idea, a heavy-hitting focus, which is successive Irish governments costing the lives of innocent children, right? That was the focus. That's a compelling argument against the government, right? That is an emotional argument as well as a reasonable one against sitting governments. So it's in their interest if they can swap that out and put in an argument about hanging flags in public. That's far more innocent and less detrimental to the power that they hold, right? So it is absolutely in their interest to swap the death of children out and put in an emotional reaction to flags being held in public or being raised in public, right? Watch how that is happening. Put the topics aside for the second and how you feel about the individual topics. Look at the manoeuvring that's going on above that, right? And you will start to see that we are still in a seriously just reactionary phase to what the government is doing, right? They dangle a carrot, we bite, and then once that's run its course, something else comes up. And then a serious topic, right? That has serious negative consequences for the government, or could, if channeled correctly, right, and focused. But they keep swerving out. They keep swapping out these foreground characters or these foreground topics. It neutralizes the animosity and the anger and the righteous indignation of people against the government, right? It neutralizes that by swapping it out, taking the heat on a different topic, and then that just fades into the background as well, because in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that big a deal compared to some of the other things that are going on, right? So what we need to do is set our stall out. What are 3 or 4 primary things that are costing the lives and the well-being of everyday people, and focus on that, build the case around that, because by constantly biting on these hooks that the government and the media spin out for us, it just takes the steam out of everything, and we end up fighting 1,000 different things instead of nailing them on 3 or 4.